You don't own your things. Your things own you, and the cost they charge isn't measured in dollars, it's measured in something you can never earn back. Think about the last time you bought something you were certain would upgrade your life. A gadget, a piece of furniture, maybe just something you saw 3 times in an ad and suddenly couldn't stop thinking about. For the first few days it felt right, like a small victory, and then slowly, silently, it became just another thing, something to maintain, something to find space for, something that now lives in a drawer, in a corner of a room, in a corner of your attention, pulling on something you never consciously agreed to give. You didn't just buy an object, you hired a tenant, and that tenant doesn't pay rent, it charges it from you. Right now, scattered across every room in your life, there are hundreds of these tenants. You've stopped noticing them, but your mind hasn't, and that's exactly where the problem and the real opportunity begins. There is one habit, just one, that separates people who build real, lasting wealth from people who stay permanently one paycheck behind, regardless of how much they earn. It's not investing in index funds, it's not cutting lattes. It's something that happens in the architecture of the mind, long before money ever changes hands. And once you understand it, once you see the mechanism, you won't be able to unsee it. It will change how you look at every purchase, every impulse, every add to cart moment for the rest of your life. Here's what behavioral economists and neuroscientists have been quietly documenting for decades, while financial gurus keep selling you the same recycled advice. Your attention is a finite resource, not metaphorically finite, clinically finite. Cognitive researchers measure it in what they call attentional bandwidth, the total processing power your brain has available at any given moment. And every single object you own is permanently running as a background application inside that system. The car that needs an oil change, the gym equipment in the corner, the clothes you keep because they were expensive, the subscription you forgot about, the collection you're going to organize someday. Every single one of these is consuming cycles, micro amounts of mental energy that compound across hours, days, years. A background process you never consciously launched and can never fully close until you make a deliberate decision to. The consumer doesn't just spend money, they spend cognition. And here's where the math gets brutal. Unlike money, you cannot earn more hours of sharp mental clarity. The moment you spend it on maintenance, you cannot spend it on creation. You cannot spend it on the decisions that actually build a life. You cannot spend it on the kind of thinking that compounds into financial freedom. Have you ever noticed that the most disciplined, quietly wealthy people you've ever met tend to own remarkably few things? That's not coincidence. That's not poverty. That's a deliberate operating system. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the Roman Empire, slept on a simple soldier's mattress in the most opulent palace ever built. Not because he couldn't afford better, because he understood something that most people spend their entire lives never grasping. The energy required to maintain a self-image built on objects is energy stolen from the person you're actually trying to become. Warren Buffett still lives in the same 5-bedroom house he bought in 1958 for $31,000. He is worth hundreds of billions. The house hasn't changed. The net worth has compounded without limit, and these two facts are not unrelated. What they both discovered, what every genuinely disciplined wealth builder eventually discovers, is that freedom doesn't feel like having more, it feels like needing less. Because the moment you stop spending attention on what you own, you have something rare, a clean system, and a clean system can run anything. Now here's where most people make the critical error, and it's an error rooted in something the entire economy is designed to keep you making. The conventional financial advice will tell you, stop impulse buying, practice delayed gratification, save more. And while that advice isn't wrong, it treats the symptom instead of the disease. Because impulse purchases don't happen because people lack willpower. They happen because of a specific hijack in the brain's reward circuitry that triggers every time you interact with a designed purchasing environment, online stores, notifications, social feeds. Each of these is architecturally built to exploit a vulnerability in the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for long-term financial thinking. When dopamine gets triggered by a buy now option, the prefrontal cortex doesn't just lose the battle, it temporarily goes offline. You're not failing at discipline. You're being outgunned by systems designed by the most sophisticated behavioral scientists in the world, whose one job is to make sure you install another background app. The difference between the consumer and the wealth builder isn't that one has more willpower, it's that one has changed the architecture. And this is where it gets deeper and more uncomfortable. Psychologists have a name for what happens when your identity becomes entangled with what you own. They call it the extended self. The idea, first documented by consumer psychologist Russell Belk, is that humans routinely incorporate possessions into their sense of who they are. Your car isn't just a car. It's a statement about the person you believe yourself to be, or the person you're trying to convince others you are. This is the invisible chain, not the purchase price, not even the maintenance cost, the identity cost. Because when who you are is defined by what you have, every purchase becomes an act of self-construction. Every upgrade becomes necessary, and every moment of financial discipline feels like a direct threat to your identity, not just to your comfort. That's why the habit we're talking about isn't primarily a financial literacy habit. It's an identity migration, a migration from a self built on having to a self built on being. And that migration begins with one specific practice. But here's the problem most people face when they first try to change this. The system is designed to make the audit feel impossible. The marketplace isn't neutral. Every interface, every algorithm, every recommendation is optimized for one outcome: to install more apps, more subscriptions, more commitments, more mental tenants. And when you've been running a cluttered OS for years, even the idea of clearing it can feel disorienting. What's left if not the things? Who are you if not what you own? That question is the real question, and the answer is the whole point of this. The mental RAM audit is not minimalism for its own sake. It's not about deprivation or aesthetic performance. It's about asking, for every object, every subscription, every possession in your life, a single, relentless question. Is this paying me back in attention or stealing from it? Assets pay dividends, liabilities extract rent. This is basic financial literacy. But almost nobody applies it to the most valuable balance sheet they own, the balance sheet of their own cognition. When you run this audit honestly, something strange happens. The things that remain aren't fewer, they're clearer. Each one carries weight because it was chosen, not because it arrived by algorithm, not because it was on sale, not because it was performing an identity you were trying to build. And the financial consequence of this shift is where the math becomes staggering. Every dollar that doesn't go to a liability goes somewhere else. Invested at historical average market returns, $40 a week that previously evaporated into impulse purchases becomes, over 20 years with compound interest, more than $200,000. That's not a typo. That's not a get-rich scheme. That's arithmetic. But the deeper compound isn't monetary. It's cognitive. Every hour your mental OS runs clean, it compounds into decisions made with clarity instead of dopamine, into identity built on what you've chosen to become instead of what the algorithm suggested you buy. That is the separation, that is the single habit, not delayed gratification as an act of gritted teeth willpower, but delayed gratification as the natural consequence of running a clean system, of knowing with absolute certainty that everything you truly need is already installed. So here's the internal negotiation script, the specific practice that rewires this in real time. The next time you feel the pull of a purchase, before you click, before you reach for your card, run these 3 lines in sequence. First, does this pay me or cost me attention? Not money, attention, because the money question is already built into the system. The attention question is the one they don't want you asking. Second, am I buying this, or am I renting out a piece of my cognitive real estate to it permanently? Third, who is making this decision right now? The version of me building toward financial freedom, or the version of me that the algorithm just activated? 3 questions, 15 seconds. The prefrontal cortex comes back online. The dopamine hijack loses its grip. You don't need more willpower, you need a better interrupt signal. Marcus Aurelius wrote something that took him his entire life to fully understand. He wrote it in private, never intending it to be published. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." He wasn't writing about Stoic philosophy as an abstract concept. He was writing about the operating system, about the recognition that the one resource no empire, no marketplace, no algorithm can ever take without your permission is your attention. The wealthy don't just manage money better, they manage attention better. And attention, compounded over a lifetime of deliberate, clean decisions, is the only asset that grows without limit. The question isn't what you're going to stop buying. The question is what you're going to start building with what you free up. Close one app, just one. See what your system can do when it finally has the space to run.